Welcome to the Open Minds podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Balkran, and welcome back, Allison. It hasn't been that long.
I'm so happy to be back. It has been long. We have gone through like frogs and locusts, pestilence. We've gone through all the Old Testament stuff. I think it's been a month, maybe, and yet it feels like 12. I have aged 12 years.
When we last spoke, Joe Biden was president.
Okay.
Donald Trump
still is. He still is president. That's that doesn't change. That's good.
That's true. There was no attempted assassination on Donald Trump.
Oh my God, you're real. Wait,
Yeah.
did that happen? The assassination attempt happened after? Good.
Yep.
God, this has been a couple weeks. Okay.
Right. Kamala was totally fine as vice president, and we were all kind of just like, there's going to be a debate in a couple weeks, wondering how that's going to go. And it's so interesting how the debate for many shifted the trajectory of Joe Biden.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. So I think we spoke right before the debate.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. That was, it was a more innocent time. So the debate. Okay. So it's the problem is that Joe Biden, who's I think 475 years old, is president. Is like, I mean, he's just beloved, right?
Yeah.
And has done, forget, if you're a Republican, you're like, no, he's the Antichrist, and he's either done absolutely nothing or he's done way too much, like at the same time. They can't quite reconcile this. But as it turns out, like everybody was like, no, Joe's great. Like he's really great. And yeah, maybe he's a little old, but that's okay. It'll be fine. Yeah. And the right is like, he's basically a Chuck E. Cheese doll. They turn him on in the morning and he like plays his banjo. And then, who's in charge? And then that was that, right?
Right.
And so then I know that I was hoping for the Joe Biden, even of the State of the Union address, where he came out and he was like, kind of roaring for an old man, and it was like, okay, he's got some punch. And that was not the Joe Biden who showed up at the debate. The Joe Biden who showed up at the debate was, my husband has an expression, I'm not sure if it's offensive, but he didn't know if he was punched or bored. Like he was not there, right? Yeah. I mean, it was like Rocky after like 5 Rockies, sort of not making sense and trailing off and doing all of the things that I had to turn it off after the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I can't take any more of this. Like, we're all going to die. And you knew it was bad because Donald Trump pulled the punches. Yeah. Like, even Donald Trump, who might be one of the meanest people in the entire country, was like, yeah, this is really sad. And if he's being nice, then like, oh, no. And so the calls for you have to go began. And there was so much pushback and and then the calls grew a little bit louder and a little bit stronger from like real sort of heavyweights in the party, most notably the queen, the boss, Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House. I guess they gave her this completely unofficial title of Speaker Emeritus, which isn't a thing, but of course it's a thing because she's Nancy Pelosi. And who doesn't love Nancy? And the answer is no, everybody loves Nancy because Nancy's like, so Joe Biden says, I've made my decision. I'm going to stay in the race. And Nancy Pelosi goes on Morning Joe on MSNBC and is like, I think he needs to make a decision quickly.
Wow.
And when I heard that, I was like, no, Mommy's mad. Joe, you gotta go. Mommy's mad, like really mad. Like Mommy caught you having a party. You gotta go. You have got to go. And then there was like more pushback and more, and then all this sort of infighting, and the Republicans were just munching their popcorn like, this is the best thing to ever happen to us. This is fantastic. Democrats in disarray. It was the capital of everything. And so just as the Democrats are like, no, we're going to kick him out, Donald Trump is shot at in my home state of Pennsylvania in a northwestern county called Butler County. And suddenly everything got real serious. Like, I wonder why anybody would take this rhetoric that's so inflammatory and horrible and do something about it. Like, I don't know. It's a mystery to me. And thank God the president really was just sort of nicked a little bit. And it's so sad that the guy who died, who's, I feel like I'm a 50 something. So anybody who dies in their 50s, I'm like, oh my God, it's so young. Like, they barely just finished high school. Because it feels like they're my contemporary. And he was covering his family. It just was like the saddest thing in the world. So that's super sad. And the Democrats are like, okay, now what do we do? I don't know what to do. Okay, everybody, let's take a moment. And at that moment, the Republican convention started. So it was
what do we do? What do we do?
yeah, like this is wow, timing being everything. Like, what is happening? So I thought it would be really good if on the first night of the convention, when Joe Biden was doing a sit down with Lester Holt of NBC News, he came out and was like, you know what? Drop mic, like I'm out. It's fine. And he didn't do that. And he also didn't sound great. And so then all the Democrats are like, oh no. And the Republicans were cut. They had like 1 foot in the, we're normal, 1 foot in the sharks and batteries and Hannibal Lecter school of like, we hate everybody. And it was that 1 foot in the normal where Nikki Haley, who had not been invited to the convention, the former South Carolina governor who ran for president against Donald Trump and got creamed in the primaries, but still had 20% of the Republican vote. She had been shunned from the RNC, and then the Republican said, oh no, you should come and talk. And I was like, oh my God, if you're a Democrat, like this is the pits, because it's one thing to have the Democrats in total disarray. They're Democrats. Okay. I've been watching Democrats for 55 years. That's kind of like the default. You know what I mean? Like that's where they are. The Democratic Party, they're just a bunch of, screw ups, right? And just, kind of like everyone's like walking around like, it'll be okay. I'm sure it'll be fine. The number of times I've heard like the American public takes this decision seriously. They will understand. I was like, you haven't met them. You haven't met them. You haven't met them. You have not met the general public. They're not going to take this job seriously. They already proved it to us.
Yeah.
They think the guy who's like, oh, it's really interesting. It's all the stuff we were talking about last time. Like the louder, the better. Donald Trump is so loud. And so I began really wetting the bed. And I only realized how depressed I was when again, Nancy Pelosi, who's such a boss, finally was like, boosh, and just pushed basically Joe Biden into making the decision that he finally made a week ago, Sunday, the whatever the heck that is, 21st, at 1:46 in the afternoon, which I know only because apparently he told his senior advisors at 1:45.
Oh, wow.
So he hit send and the tweet.
Oh my
1 minute after he had a Zoom where he was like, by the way, I'm dropping out of the race.
Wow.
Bye, bitches, send. And then the letter goes out and everybody's like, I think, what's going to happen now? And Nancy Pelosi is like, you're not following along.
Wow.
Everybody,
the queen maker. Yeah.
And they did. And everybody got in line and Kamala stepped up. A half an hour later, Joe Biden endorsed her. And so there was a little bit of like, what are you doing? Like, like, where's this going to go? But once he endorsed Kamala, then suddenly it was just, then it was like, okay, everybody's back on the same page. Nancy Pelosi is like dusting off her boxing gloves going, I did it. And she did. And nobody challenged her. For like a hot minute, we thought that Joe Manchin, who is a sort of Democrat from West Virginia, but now is an independent, he was like, maybe I will. And Nancy Pelosi must have just emerged in a dream, like a fugue state and was like, no, you don't. And he was like, no, I'm still scared of you. Cool. Okay, cool. That was it. And now the amount of money that is flowing to Kamala and attention and vibes and memes and everyone, like, I didn't realize how depressed and breath holding I was until this past Monday. And then I realized, wow, this has really been taking a hit on me. Okay.
Wow.
Got it. Cool. Yeah. It's been a lot.
If you have been living under a rock, that summary from Alison should definitely bring everyone up to speed. That was incredible.
Thank you.
You were able to.
12 minutes. That's American history in the last 3.5 weeks.
That is incredible, Alison. I mean, you really did get through all of what's been happening. And I want to pick some of that apart. So, both of us have and currently work in large organizations advising big senior executives. And we both know, when we know something's up, we talk to our colleagues, we talk to, others, and we say, I don't know, the pressure might be getting to that person. I don't want to start anything, but something's definitely up.
Yeah.
That, I think the American public, maybe this is just my assumption, but I think most people are wondering, why wasn't anybody flagging this to kind of some of the higher senior execs within the Biden inner circle to say, hey, like, is everything okay? It seems like we're the ones making the policy decisions here when we really do rely on the president with that executive authority, that executive power.
Okay, so I think there are a couple things that happen at the same time. First of all, I do authentically believe that he is still making decisions. I think, though, that he is surrounded by a staff that's ferociously loyal and that makes sure that he is like at the top of his game for when the decisions need to be made.
Right.
And I think that they keep out a lot of people who are not as ferociously loyal.
I see.
And so, the other part of this is, without being sort of overly partisan, that Donald Trump is viewed as such an existential threat to American democracy.
Right.
That, like, if the president of my university, a gentleman named Charles Patterson, if I thought, like, he's acting not right, like maybe he's developed a gigantic drug problem, but we were about to be invaded by Millersville, which is another university,
Right.
probably wouldn't bring that to the attention of everybody while we were about to be invaded by Millersville. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, we're already
now
under
maybe
attack.
not the time. Everybody, everybody, let's get on. Let's stem the threat, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Mhm.
And so I think that what happened was that debate performance was so shocking because all we had heard was he's fine, sharp as a tack, he's going to be okay. Right. Don't you remember the State of the Union address? He was awesome. And I was like, I do remember the State of the Union address. He was awesome. Yay.
Right.
And so I bought it. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he's fine. I even tweeted out, I think, like, if it's a choice between the end of American democracy and electing grandpa who needs to have his car keys taken away from him, there kind of isn't a choice for me.
Right.
But then we saw it was like, no. It's not that he should have his car keys taken away from him. It's that he needs to be tended to 24 hours a day because he is a threat to himself and everybody around him. Whether that is actually true or not, boy, did it look like it. And when we're talking about threat to yourself and everybody around you, you're really talking about the world. And that's so the question was less like, can you run and win? It was like, can you last another 4 years? It was an atrocious, truly astonishing performance. And so once that question was raised, like, is he going to actually make it? Then two things happened. One, the folks who wanted to really push started pushing. But two, all the way, this was so much fun to watch just as an outside observer. The White House press corps, who hadn't said a freaking word. Yeah. Now we're like, well, I didn't want to say something. I'm like, oh, you did. Okay, so that part of reporting was lost. Like, he didn't want to. It just skipped your mind, that he would come out and be like, donuts. Like, that you didn't want to report. Okay, cool. So all of them were doing the, sort of, look at how important I am. I kept this secret, for the sake of the country. Like, now bite me. And so, that all happened at the same time. What has been really interesting to watch is the trajectory, like the cycles of emotion and grief on the right, because they came into that convention and left that convention chest thumping and smug, like, oh man, not only are we going to walk away with this presidency, which by the way, they very well still might. I mean, who the hell knows, right? Yeah. I'm not saying they're not going to, but they were wrapped, they had like a Snuggie, of like, that man is old and totally feeble. And we told you he was practically dead. And not only are we going to win the White House, we're going to win the House, we're going to win the Senate, we're going to win the whole everything. Ha ha ha. Right. Snuggie. Yeah. And then suddenly Kamala comes in and it's like, oh, no. And all they could reach for was like, but that's not the person we thought we were running against. Like, okay, cool. I guess things change and Maybe you shouldn't have spent the last 2 years saying he was so old he needed to go, because apparently you were right, mazel. And now you have to fight against somebody else.
Yeah, it's the now what kind of syndrome. Allison, you mentioned something which I found interesting and goes back to our initial conversation about Newt Gingrich really ushering in this kind of like outrage politics. And I found that super fascinating when we were chatting about it. And as you mentioned, the ferociously loyal, it is in stark contrast to, Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, Leadership, where Doris highlights Abraham Lincoln, who
Team of
purposely
rivals.
Right. Team of rivals puts his entire cabinet filled with his political rivals and people who will like challenge him on everything, because he would always say, I'm not the smartest person in the room.
Right.
And now you have a politic of presidents who have these fiercely loyal attack dogs almost. Do you
Sure.
think that that's also like undermining the process? Like when no one's willing to say, reminds me of Downfall with, Hitler in the bunker, like none of his guards are willing to tell him how serious the Soviet threat is. And now they're at a point where they can't fight it off anymore and everything's going to fall apart.
I think, okay, again, a couple things I think happen at the same time. Here's what I think. First of all, so I can't remember if we talked about it or not. There's a book by a bunch of political scientists called The Party Decides. And it was written, I think, in like 2012. And since then, which is just testament to how boring political scientists are at parties, like all we do is fight about, like, does the party decide? Like that, I have been on conference panels where they're almost like, it almost comes to blows. And the head of the conference found me afterwards, like, I understand there was a problem at the parties panel. I was like, yeah, we're fine. So the question is, like, do the parties have the power anymore to decide who's going to be the candidates? And so you really could argue that in this case, you can argue yes and no, right? So the party, I think, was deciding in the lead up to our primary system, because in the lead up, it was like, no, incumbent. He's been a great president. He's a great man. He was in the Senate for 30 years. He was vice president for 8 years. Yeah. He is the definition of avuncular, which is uncle-like. He's just a delight. Like Joe Biden is just a total freaking delight. And so everyone's like, no, he's our dude. He's our dude. And look at him. And he was fine. Like 2 years ago, he was finer than he is now. And by the way, that also has to do with how hard the job is, right? Barack Obama, if you just watch Barack Obama age in those 8 years, I mean, those are actual, that's dog years. He aged like 40 years because the pressure is so overwhelming. Everybody ages. Yeah. Everybody does. For sure. And so I think the last 2 years have been really hard, especially a man in his late 70s / early 80s. It tends to speed up a little bit. So the party decided, and there was some guy, Dean Phillips, who ran against him in the primary. And Dean Phillips, I think, got like 14 votes total. Like, I think I got more votes in the primaries than Dean Phillips did. So he was not really challenged. And then once he secures the nomination in our primary system, then there's nothing you can do. I mean, absolutely, like legally, there was no way for the party to actually kick him off the ballot, because he'd gone through the primary system, he had won the votes. That's the system that we had. And once that settled into place, which was like, it's sweet, then it had to be Joe Biden's decision. And so from what I understand, Biden does surround himself with contrarian thoughts about policy, but he surrounds himself politically with a team of very well-worn, good, deep, long-lasting friends. Like his sister Valerie is one of his closest advisors, Mike Donnellan, a couple of other folks who he's known for 50 years. Wow. I mean, one of his advisors is older than he is. Like they've known each other for half a century. And so he trusts them. And that is not an unusual phenomenon. In fact, the Obamas were sort of notorious because the Clintons, Bill and Hillary roll into town in 92, and suddenly the White House becomes basically like a club. Like everybody's there, like hanging out, like whoop whoop, like everyone it's mingling and networking and doing all this sort of stuff. And the Obamas were like, no way. We have to have known you for at least, 20 years. before we are going to let you into our inner sanctum.
Wow.
And so it's not unusual for presidents to be that
Right.
sort of like closed.
Sure.
Because you're the most powerful person in the world. Everybody's got an agenda. Who are you going to trust? Which is
Correct.
why I should never be president, because I trust everybody. Like if you come to me and you're like, oh my God, you're great. I'm like, yes. And that is exactly how like Al Qaeda like would take over the country, because they'd be like, oh, we love you. I'd be like, yeah, you're right. And so it's probably smart of him to keep those, Biden to keep those political advisors really tight. But they're also the ones who are, they didn't have any skin in the game. It's not like they needed him to stay in because they need to write a book or anything. Like I said, they're all like 114 years old. It's just that they were so dedicated to the man who they know and the friend who they've had. And, and he's a really honorable dude. And if you just, his story, good gravy. I don't know if you guys know the story of Joe Biden. I mean, his first wife and his daughter were killed in a car accident. And then he never drove again after that until, forever. And he took the Amtrak to work on Capitol Hill every day, which is like the sweetest thing in the world. He took the train, which everyone's like, yeah, whatever in Canada. But like here, are you kidding? You can't pry our fat asses out of our cars. And he was just so sweet. And then he gets married to Jill, and she's a professor, and they Bo and Hunter, and then Bo dies in his right out of high school, right? I mean, like what I was saying earlier, of cancer, so freaking sad. And then Hunter's an addict, and and they released that audio tape from the laptop that's Joe, just you could hear him, he's crushed. He's like, buddy, I don't know what to do to help you. And I'm crying just even thinking about it. This is a great freaking guy. You want to tell that great freaking guy that he's, that he's too old and he's got to go? I don't think you do.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? It makes sense for any minister, cabinet minister, presidential candidate to keep their people who knew them when they were, I hate to say it lowly, but when they were a congressperson, when they were a senator, when they were nowhere near the fame that presidential, right? Because those are the people that advised you, counseled you, you relied on, and certainly you want to keep them around. But what I was finding interesting, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, is as the kind of pressure started to mount on Joe Biden, he was like defiant up until the end almost. He was like, you know what, there's people maneuvering behind. They need to recognize I'm the president. And I thought, this is Joe Biden's like last rally call around the party to say, rally behind me. I'm your guy still. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are from your experience in politics. It's like, did he say that because that was his last rally cry and he knew it in a way? Or was he actually pointing to what some of the Republicans are saying, is that there are actual fissures inside the party, Camp Biden, Camp Kamala, Camp whomever, and he's kind of exposing some of that. What are your thoughts?
My understanding from like deeply sourced reporters, not the talking heads, but like the reporters who are really kind of like in Biden world, was he and a lot of it was hubris, and also like a lot of it is like they underestimated me before, right? They said I couldn't win, and I did. And I read an article where someone described his ability to take a lot of political pain. Like he first ran for president in 1988, and lost, and then he ran for president in 2008, and lost, and became vice president instead.
People forget that, eh? Like they really do forget that.
Yeah, I mean, he's he's a guy who's like, no, I don't think you understand. Like I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. And then then you get to, it's like high school, right? It's less fissures than it is sort of like high school lunch tables. So all the Obama guys, like the Bidens did not love the Obamas. Like everybody loves the Obamas. We all love the Obamas. They're amazing. But the teams, right? The Obama team said to Joe Biden in 2016, "Don't run now, because we want Hillary. We had a first Black president. We want our first woman president. White man, you got to step aside." And I was like, have you met Americans? They need a palate cleanser. Like they're coming off of the first Black president, who, by the way, 42% of the American public not so happy about that development. And now you're going to throw the least popular woman in all of America onto the ticket. Like, I was going, I don't know. This doesn't seem like the right time for her. Just kidding. There is no right time for her. Like, she is so. I had a quote in 2016 with a reporter from Pittsburgh who's now like super famous because she's the one who coined the term about Donald Trump, that his supporters took him seriously but not literally, and the reporters took him literally but not seriously.
Right.
Selena Zito. She was doing an interview with me in 2016, and I remember saying to her, Hillary comes to this candidacy with more baggage than Elizabeth Taylor. And that made like the poll quote in the newspaper, because it just was a really sort of like snapshot of a way to say like, oh my gosh, my students hated Hillary Clinton. Like, if I said Hillary Clinton, they would like shudder. And some of them were Democrats, the Republicans really hated her. And in fact, I can't remember. Did I tell you the story about getting the car magnet in 2016 for Hillary?
I don't recall.
If you donated $30, you could put you got a car magnet in return. And so I got a car magnet, and I was driving this mommy van at the time. My children were younger. Yeah. And I said to my husband, I'm going to put the Hillary thing on. And he said, yeah, don't do that. And I said, okay, I know you're a Republican, but like, why? And he said, because someone's going to smash your windshield. Yeah. And I don't want to have to pay for that. And I was like, okay, well, I think you're being a little hyperbolic here. And so I was then talking to my next door neighbor, Marilyn, who is a delight and a grandmother. And I told her what my husband had said. And her response was, well, they should smash your windshield. Hillary Clinton is a crook. And I was like, whoa. Okay, no car magnets. Just
the universe
me out. I was like, done. Like, if a grandmother wants to do physical damage to my mommy van, like, then I'm not putting that thing on. People despised her. And so they pushed Joe Biden away. And Joe Biden, I think was a little resentful, because I think he really and probably correctly thought he could beat Donald Trump. Nobody was taking Donald Trump as a very serious threat. Donald Trump was not taking Donald Trump as a very serious threat in 2016. I mean, he was more shocked. Malaria was more shocked than anybody, that he won. And so, so Joe Biden just felt like, everybody stop telling me to go. I know what I'm doing. And so he's wrapping himself in that. And I think that when the polling numbers started coming out, like bigger, and apparently there was a very nasty Zoom call with House Democrats from swing states. And it got ugly. And that was on Saturday afternoon, the day of Donald Trump's assassination attempt. I mean, it was so ugly that folks were going to go straight to the press and be like, by the way, and just out the entire thing, because he was mean, Biden, which nobody really seen before, when grandpa gets angry. So he was mean and deeply personal and very belligerent. And he kind of stopped the Zoom call and said, my people are telling me I got to go to church. And so, which he does every Saturday night. And so his people pull him away. He goes to mass. And 15 minutes later, there's an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. So the House Democrats didn't, thankfully, they did not reveal all of this to everybody at the time. But the news cycle had moved away. And then when the news cycle starts ebbing back, they were a little more circumspect and said, we are really still very concerned. We know that you're angry, but look, here's more polling data. And once that polling data came out, that's when you started to have more and more Democrats say, it's time, you got to go. And so, getting back to my hero, Nancy Pelosi, I think she and Hakeem Jeffries, who's the House Democratic leader here, and Chuck Schumer, who's the Senate Majority Leader, I think they all had his ear enough to say, we're going to let you make the decision, but if you don't make the right decision, we're going to go public. And I think it was that threat of going public with, you have to go, all because of the polling data. And so I think that it was more sort of, it was grief, right? I mean, he had to come to terms with this tremendous loss. He's been a successful president. He won. I mean, like, why are you telling me to go away? I won. And the answer is because you can't form a full sentence anymore after 8 o'clock at night. And that's why.
Alison, you paint such an interesting painting with like tapestry, because I really want to pick some of what you've just said apart. let's think about this. You run for president in 1988, 2008, and 2016.
Mhm.
Sorry, in 2008 and then 2020. It's like there's something about eating crap and
Mhm.
liking it you become accustomed to. And you say, you know what? Maybe it isn't my time in 1988. Maybe I'm too young. I don't have enough experience. I understand what the party's concerns are. Sure. But then you get more experience. And
Mhm.
still, that's that saying, sadly, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Well,
Right.
now Biden is vice president to Obama. He's going all over the world. He's going across the United States, and
Mhm.
it's not his policies he's championing, even
Right.
though he's been sitting on the sidelines seeing what the United States needs to do,
Right.
and he can't actually put that forward. Instead, he's at an age now where he's trumpeting Obama's issues that he
Mhm.
loves, Obamacare, and he knows there's already tension between his camp and Obama's camp, but he's being the good soldier because he
Yep.
knows if the DNC sees that he can eat more crap, even as vice president, even for someone he doesn't fully like, even someone that, he doesn't see eye to eye with, enough Democrats inside their inner circle will say, this is the guy, forget Hillary, forget anyone else, he's the guy. And in 2016, they tell him again to eat crap and
Mhm.
put aside. And then in 2020, now he's at an age where he's like, everyone, even if I am, 6 feet under, I am still the president of the I am the leader of this damn party. I've eaten your crap for 30 plus years. I can understand his frustration on that Zoom call, even though the Republicans are chomping at the bit saying, you should have known, to step
Yeah.
down. Da, da. Oh, from Biden's perspective, he's like, no, I have eaten so much crap. They're now going to have to deal with me at this advanced age. And I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to go out on my shield. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not going to lie down. I'm going to go out. And so part of me wonders if the Trump assassination didn't happen, and the Democratic members went out on the call saying Biden was very belligerent, that Biden would double down on that and say, yes, I was, because this is my damn party, damn it, and I'm leading us into the next election, and all the people who are talking, they're all trying to undermine us and put Donald Trump in the driver's seat. Like, I just wonder, had the assassination attempt not happened, would that have shifted things for Biden, do you think?
Probably would have sped things up a little bit because
Mm,
there really was a week, like the whole week
yeah.
of the RN, the Republican National Convention. That whole week was just a lot of attention on Trump, a lot of attention on JD
Mm-hmm.
Vance, his running mate.
Yeah.
And I would say this. Yes, he's had to eat a lot of crap, and yes, he's had to really suffer through a lot of political pain. And boy, did he learn a lot in that process.
Yeah.
It's not as if he was just, that Chumbawamba song, right? He gets
Yeah.
knocked down and then he comes back up again. Um,
Yeah.
he did, but he also in the process learned a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
So, we say, okay, you're very old. Look at 2020 Joe Biden. Like he was old, but nobody was saying like,
He's
damn,
too
you're
old.
old.
Yeah.
It was more like you are the elder statesman. And once there's a black congressman named James Clyburn from South Carolina, once he endorsed Joe Biden, like everybody else was like, okay, he's got it. Okay, we're good. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that has to do with the demographics of the Democratic Party in the United States, which is very, very diverse in terms of age, race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, religion. The Republican Party is far more homogenous. And so Joe Biden, who again, super decent guy, was able kind of to pull together a coalition of folks. The stories about him were in 2020 were legendary, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's Christian, he's Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a devout Catholic. And one of the stories I read, because it was shared to me by my adorably, sweetly Jewish father and all of the Jewish friends that he has, which is all of his friends. And I must have gotten this story like 100,000 times in my inbox. But there was a woman in Delaware who died. She was like 97 years old or something. And she was Jewish. And so her funeral was very sparsely attended. There were like 20 people who were there, her immediate family, whatever. And suddenly the door opens up and Joe Biden as vice president walks in. Like everyone's like,
Wow.
what are you doing here? And so they actually stopped the funeral because they're like, Mr. Vice President, are you in the right place? And he said, oh, no, I'm here to pay respects to this woman. And they said, how did you know her? And he said, She donated $13 to my campaign every year.
Wow.
And you know what? I take that loyalty really seriously. Please continue. She was a lovely lady. There were that stories by the dozens. And
Wow.
so he was able to pull together all of these folks and his inherent kindness. He also was gaffe prone. I mean, this was a guy who, really kind of stepped on his tongue quite a bit. But in 2020, that worked. And then he was really successful. That's the other thing, is that he wasn't like in the ground. He wasn't dead. He got more bipartisan legislation through. It's the first gun bill that we've had in 30 years, and he did it. Very impressive stuff. Yeah, I mean, I see the old manness of like, I've eaten so much crap. You can't make me do this. I've earned this.
Yeah.
And also the hesitancy to be like, we're going to get rid of that guy. Like, that guy's good. I mean, just look at his
Yeah.
record. Like, he's good.
Yeah.
He has like a whole bunch of stuff. Like, and then people were freaking out, like, who else would we have? Oh my God, it'll be a food fight. It'll be terrible. And if America really doesn't like black people, like having a black woman candidate, like humanity, and then suddenly it happens and everyone's like, it's great. She's awesome. And she's like breaking fundraising records and she's,
Yeah.
she's dancing around and she's got so much energy that just galvanized the entire party and really I think scares the bedoobies out of the Trump administration or Trump campaign rather.
Yes. And so, Alison, I want to ask you about the policy piece because you mentioned that he's passed the most amount of bipartisan bills. I don't think enough
Recently.
I don't think enough both Americans and Canadians know that, because when you just listen to the rhetoric, you think that they're polar opposites when it comes to policy, when it comes to Trump and Biden. And on key issues, there's so much similarity, like domestic oil production. Joe Biden has authorized, the Willow Project in Alaska, huge project. It's going to add 600 million barrels over 30 years. The policies on Israel, very similar. I mean, I wonder if Trump were in power when October 7th happened and the bill of $26 billion to Israel, like Trump would agree with that. I mean, I find it so interesting because you said Biden has so much experience. He knows what's going to pass. He knows the inner workings of both parties. So he's able to table bills in slightly different ways that gets the attention of Republicans, moderate Republicans, that if they vote it down, it's almost like, well, you're voting down something your party agrees with, kind of thing. So you're really doing more damage to your constituents by saying no to this. So why do you think...
By the way, they are absolutely willing to do damage to their constituents. They've proven that. The Republicans have proven that up one side and down the other. And what is astonishing to a lot of Democrats is that the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which just is throwing so much money at roads and bridges and just like the sort of the foundational stuff of politicking, all of them now are like at the bridge opening, they're like, hello and you're welcome. And it's like, you voted against that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the folks who are running against it were like, hi, you voted, here's your voting record. You voted against this. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, Biden knew that they'd be out there at the bridge openings because it's just good politics, even though they voted against it.
It's so interesting because we're not getting this nuance in outrage politics media at all. At all. We are getting in Canada and the United States because, we are getting that Joe Biden is too old. He's basically on his way to retirement home, a nursing home, and Donald Trump is around his same age but has so much more energy, and Donald Trump is going to, build the country back up. Biden's torn it down. He's supported, he's given money to Ukraine. He's not standing up to China. He's not doing the things. But if you look at the policies, that they're so interesting how similar they are. And we're not talking about that policy piece as a result of someone who spent 30 plus years in politics and understands how government works.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that I have found slightly amusing is that bracing for impact on the right of, what's the over under on when Republicans start getting virulently racist against Kamala Harris, right? Because it's already begun.
It's gonna happen,
they're calling her a DEI candidate. It's so offensive. And so as I'm bracing for impact of that, it became very, very clear that was a bad move. And so the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, made a statement that said, this election is going to be about policy, not personality. And I actually tweeted out, "Oh, baby boy, where have you been for the last 8 years?"
I wish it were about policy, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, like, what have you done about policy? You have done nothing about policy. And your caucus is sitting there ready to just reach down your throat and rip your heart out if you start going in any kind of consistent policy way. It is all personality now.
Yes,
And so,
100%.
the policies that Americans want and the policies that Americans understand are two very different sets of policies. And so, everybody was super happy to get those stimulus checks after, during and after COVID. And then prices went up. Now, the government didn't make prices go up. We don't have that kind of economy.
Right.
Private businesses are like, damn, everybody's got so much money in their pockets, it's falling out. They look like a cartoon character. We're going to jack up prices. And, at the point where I was buying sliced turkey and it went up to $9.99 for a family thing, I was like, all right. Now, if I'm beginning to notice, that's too much, right? And so folks are like, damn the government, they made inflation. And I was like, well, yes, sort of. But, they're like, the economy's in the toilet. I'm like, but it's not actually. We have record low unemployment. The Fed is doing a good job of stemming inflation, which doesn't mean the prices are going to go back to what it was before COVID. But there's a lot of just like sort of easily remembered and factually incorrect assumptions about what policies are doing and whether they're working. And so Americans want, we're kind of a, I want it now kind of country, which is evident from the absolutely everything that we have. I mean, from fast food, where if it gets any faster, they're going to have a robot come out, like open up your mouth and like shove a hamburger in it, and then like chew for you. It's just, we're just like now, immediate gratification. Okay, there's a price to be paid by that, and so now we are paying the price, so the policy stuff is a little confusing, I think.
You're right, Alison. It reminds me in the 1980s with the Volcker shock when it came, right? How do I know about that?
Good, our Canadian schools, man. Paul Volcker? How do you know Paul Volcker? You are awesome. God, Canada. I swear to God, your education system it just puts us into a locker with a wedgie. This is awesome.
It is not. No, it is not the education. It's just my own interest. I went down a rabbit hole with it.
All right. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I still think it's your education system. Go ahead, continue.
But it was like, it makes you wonder the severity of inflation perception versus reality, right? So, Paul Volcker comes in, makes these sweeping changes. A lot of poverty rights groups are like, what's going on here? This is really going to hurt us. Things are going to get cut. Our livelihoods are at stake here. And it's not because necessarily the inflation was going to ruin everyone's lives. It was the perception by the public. And I feel like it's the same here, like this thing will take time to work out of the economy. We do need to like bring this down, but it's the perception, the $9.99 turkey slices. It's like enough people start saying those things, suddenly the Overton window, it shifts in there, and that's all the Republicans, Democrats focus on. And it actually shifts people who, like here in Canada, it shifts, conservatives who've been fighting for that. It starts shifting to the Liberals and the NDP, which is the third party, which is left-leaning, to start saying, we do need to stick it to those CEOs because they're the ones driving up the prices at the grocery store. And the perception is what's focused on, not the actual. We've had, I think this is our fourth quarter here in Canada with record low inflation. And so it's like no one's talking about that.
Right.
We're only talking about how, the government needs to do something immediately and something like the Volcker shock is necessary.
Yep. As if the president has like a sliced turkey button on the Resolute desk and it's like, all right, I guess it's time. Click, and it goes back down to $6.99 for the family pack. It's this, it's a vibes. It's really a vibes election. And I think a lot of this has to do with the media because we're all getting information from a lot of different sources, and depending on where and how you get what kind of media and news information and content that you get, you're gonna be sold a narrative. And that narrative is going to be, for the left, a lot of the Instagram or Twitter folks are just, it's going to be like, okay, it's corporate greed, and on the right, it's like, it's the old man, who's making everything too expensive.
Yeah.
But what people consistently fail to see is that it's our own damn fault, right? I mean, from toilet paper shortages during COVID,
Yeah.
like, why? Why were there like, suddenly, yes, we are stuck inside. Are we going to be going to the bathroom more than we did before? I don't think so. Like, physically, there was no reason. But the second everyone's like, toilet paper, like, people are like shoving children and grandmothers out of the way and like lunging for the big pack of
Charmin.
Yeah, that's it. I was like, what is a toilet paper brand? And I have like PTSD from this. So, I mean, I don't want to say this on a podcast because if it really goes down, you're going to come to my house for the toilet paper, but I still have a lot of toilet paper. But for no good reason, right? It's like, what the hell? If the worst thing in the world is you take a rag and wipe yourself and then wash it, like, okay.
Is that bad?
We were just maniacal. Absolutely. And it's just vibes.
Yeah.
All it was vibes.
Yes. Yeah. Alison, we've spent all this time talking about Joe Biden because it's so important. I wanted to ask you, again, based on your research with outrage politics and outrage media, why is it that we can't shift presidential elections to policy? Because sometimes people wonder, like the Andrew Yangs and the others who have these innovative policy ideas, and they just get sidetracked, side-railed, sideswiped by the Donald Trumps, or those with the loudest, the Gavin Newsoms, those with very large megaphones. How do we kind of reel some of this back in to some things that the founding fathers talked about, with the power of the executive, how important that is, and if we allow outrage politics into it, it can really distort the policy and the perspectives that governments pursue.
Yes, it can. I would make the assumption based on just human kind that in Canada it's similar to the United States, where most people are probably more centrist than not. Most people aren't really out on the wings. And so Gavin Newsom, who I could go on a speaking tour about Gavin Newsom, and I would begin a really short PowerPoint just with that picture of he and then wife Kimberly Guilfoyle on that bearskin rug in front of the fire. And now she is the fiance of Donald Trump Jr. It's a fun story. It's a great, sexy picture. And he is a ridiculous human being. But as the governor of California, which is, I think, like the third largest economy in the world or something like that. It's
It's some large number.
Right. It's just huge. So he's a big personality and he gets a lot of the attention. The legislature of California has been trying some things and some of the things have not been working. So all the personality in the world, he's now rolling back a lot of the policies that he tried that didn't work. And I think that is testament to the fact of our general humankind centrism, right? Like, we don't want anybody to hurt, but we also don't want homeless encampments like in front of my house kind of thing, and that doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me, too liberal. It doesn't make me too conservative. It just makes me kind of centrist. And I think that that's the reality test, right? Is that what Joe Biden in 2020 really embodied was that kind of like pragmatic, like, look, I've done this before. I'm not going to try and shove wacko policies down your throat, as opposed to Donald Trump, who was like, ticks, I've never done that before. This is great. I'm going to make it so that Tuesdays are illegal. And they're like, no, you can't do that. Wait, why can't I do that? The president can do anything they want, which he actually said that the president can do in the Constitution, Article 2 says the president can do whatever he wants. Now our Supreme Court has said, maybe, go ahead, give it a try. Like, we're not going to stop you.
What are the other outer limits? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? So, so to reel it back to policy, it's the line about sausage making, that policy gets done.
Yeah.
It does, but it's really boring. Yeah. And so most people don't pay attention to it unless you're in a public administration class, or you're involved in it, right? When it's your policy,
the average person,
then you're involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's like, I don't care. Like, that seems great. Like, I don't have any cats. Like, let's give them all AR-15s. That seems fun. And so then you take an issue and you politicize it. and then the policy of it goes away. And that's where the great folks in Congress are really good at their jobs, Democrat and Republican, because on the down low, like under the cover of night with just pizza and some assistance, they get shit done. They really do. They're like, let's just do this thing. And they hammer out their differences and they compromise. But when you say compromise is a dirty word, then that makes the policy making even more difficult to achieve.
And Alison, there's such a compelling story there because I think so many Americans would want to see a little bit of that because we are so divided. At least that's what the media tells us. They see the hard work that Democrats and Republicans do and the back and forth they do on bills and say, like, let's make sure we get that in. Let's make sure we get it. I think there's like there's a lot of people would give that a lot of credit because they understand how much work that is. And that's not easy to do.
Maybe in Canada. I don't think in the United States. And here's why I say that, right? So there was an immigration bill, there was a bipartisan immigration bill that a bunch of senators worked on, and it was spearheaded by a Republican, by James Lankford, who is a Republican from Oklahoma. And when I say conservative, I mean very conservative. And he was like the head of this puppy, and they had Democrats and Republicans and independents working on it all together. And so they were like, here it is. And Donald Trump said, everybody vote against it, because if they get immigration reform done, then we can't use it as a campaign tactic. He actually said that.
Wow.
And so they were like, okay. And so then they started going against it, saying it's not enough, it's too much, it's this, it's that, it's awful, it's blah, blah, blah. And James Lankford's like, what? You asked me to do this. And then the death threats against him started coming in.
Yeah.
How dare you compromise with Democrats? How dare you go down a policy route when you know that passing this policy would be bad for, the head of the ticket? So, so sort of like some Americans would like that, but you can look not too long ago. I'm talking about like 5 months ago, something like that, where this all went down, and it was a bill that looked, it was very conservative. I'll put it that way. And Biden said, put it on my desk, I'll sign it. Yeah. And the lefties in the Democratic Party were just pulling at their bald spots like, no, what are you doing? And he said, yeah, no, I'm willing to sign it. Absolutely. You guys, it was bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans worked on it. Give it to me.
This is so, again, like, we're just not getting this at all, Alison. We're getting the Biden's this left wing,
Yeah, he's not. And that's always been the problem. Right? That's always, that goes back forever.
Sure.
That's why we're kind of out of words, because they said Nancy Pelosi had San Francisco values. And I was like, what does that mean? Like rice-a-roni and mandatory gay abortions? Like, I don't know. It's just, that was around like in the 90s. So they've always said like, oh, Barack Obama is so left.
Socialist.
He's such a liberal. He's going to take away all of your guns and he's going to tax bullets 500%. So in 2008, Barack Obama wins. My student comes running in the next day with the newspaper and she goes, look, it happened. And she hands it to me. And on the front is a picture of an empty shelves at a gun store because all the bullets had been bought.
Wow.
And she said, see, it happened. They were right that Barack Obama was going to take away our guns and our bullets. And I said, no, boo-boo. Wow. First of all, he's not even president yet. We got to wait another 2 months. But also, that isn't the government taking away the bullets. That's you guys taking away the bullets because you went and bought all the bullets. Wow. Which is a good return to like Americans kind of don't see their own place in this.
This is why American politics, a lot of Canadians get flack for being so obsessed sometimes with American politics because Canadian politics are so boring, even though our politics are getting really interesting now with Justin Trudeau, and there's so much hate here against Justin Trudeau.
That's too bad because he is so hot. Also, the way that he could do that plank, the way that he can plank, sometimes I just think of that and by my times of when I'm alone. He's a sexy dude. I mean, there's no words about it.
And he's had a rough year, his wife, right? He's had a rough, his ex-wife, his wife had left him. So, but I think the reason why we are so, and not just Canadians, but so many countries are somewhat obsessed with American politics is it blends politics and policy with, to be entertainment. But then there's this like realism where people truly in their heart believe Obama's like the socialist. We need to buy more guns because, this guy's coming to power. Biden is a leftist. Trump is going to get this country back on track. I mean, it is so deeply ingrained in the psyche. It's not enough anymore to say, yeah, like I'm Republican, but whatever. It's not a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
It's like, it's a big friggin', it's
We
part
are
of your
thigh
entire
high in soap opera land. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what the narratives are. You know, a soap opera is a really good form of entertainment because it's not just that someone's like a hot doctor, it's also that they're a murderer. You know. And so all it is narratives now, right? And it's so dramatic and it's so kind of over the top that I can understand. Also, like, you know, we are a superpower, and you know, so watching Dynasty, but with real outcomes that are problematic, like I get it, you know, but I would really like boring, which is why I have looked into moving to Canada, and you guys are really tightening up the doors there. You're not going to let me in. And I'm a delight. Okay. Canada, if you're listening, you have to let me come. I've always been a fan. I went to college on the Canadian border. I bought across the border because it was delicious. I am a fan. I know your national anthem. I'm ready. My husband's a huge hockey fan. We are ready.
You would fit in so perfectly here, Alison. I'm telling you.
Thank you.
We have not talked about Kamala Harris, nor have we talked about the Trump assassination, all the things. And you know what? I think this is so important that we focus on Joe Biden, because a lot of people don't know anything that you've just described here today. And I think this is a really interesting telltale sign of, you know, someone who has such great experience, some of the political wins that are happening and the changes that are happening right now. And I just find it super fascinating. I'm interested to see the rallying behind Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Because
so far the honeymoon's been, you know, 6 days long, which is 5 days longer than I thought she was going to get. So let's just, you know, I guess we'll have to check back and see how long the honeymoon lasts.
I'm excited to, because again, given your experience with understanding how it's being covered, I would love to come back, you know, in a few months' time to say, how do you think this was covered based on everything that you know? Or how do you predict it? Here's a good question. What do you predict is going to happen in the next, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks?
Okay, first of all, the reason we didn't get to Kamala or the assassination attempt or JD Vance or anything is because you asked me a question, I give you a 13-minute answer, and that's my bad, not yours. Okay, I apologize. But predicting, I mean, a month ago when we talked, if you had said, like, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know. It seems like it's going to be really depressing. You know, who knows? I mean, and it's so, on the one hand, exciting. And on the other hand, I don't know. Like, maybe cows are just going to be, like, running down the street. And we won't know where they came from. You know, and everyone will be like, we are moving in the right direction. I'm like, I guess that sounds fine. I don't know these things. I'm terrible at predicting on a good day. And we haven't had a good day in a very long time, Christopher. Not a very long time.
Very fair points. I take all of that, because you're right. It is going to be hard to predict. You know, it's interesting reading some of the Republicans like Vivek talk about, we can't give this up to and I'm thinking, like, there is some serious nervousness by some Republicans versus, like, you know, not even acknowledging her, focusing on Trump. You know, sometimes I think it's like a classic mistake. And I think the Democrats learned that in 2016. It's like we focused way too much on Trump instead of kind of helping to build up the Clinton brand and what that is. And so I'm wondering if the Republicans are falling into that same trap. You know, sometimes when things are a bit too good, you kick up your laurels, you think you got it easy, and then out of nowhere, someone sideswipes you off the road. I am very interested to see how the next 6 to 8 weeks go.
Me too. That's the great thing. Me too. I mean, you know, in 3 weeks we got the Democratic convention. Who knows what's going to happen before then? Who knows what's going to happen there? The last time we had a convention in Chicago, there were like riots and like dead people and stuff. So, I mean, let's hope that it isn't like that. I have no idea. My hope is that it's not violent, and at least it's slightly funny. Like, that's my, you know, that's all I want in this world. No violence. Yes, humor. That's kind of it.
Alison, this was great. I'm looking forward to our next chat. I'm hoping maybe end of September, we'll check in to say, okay, like, how are things going? And hopefully we'll have a good sense of where things are going for the next month and a bit ahead of the election.
That, or I'm going to be like at the Canadian border in my laptop, like just being
someone
like,
sponsor me.
I'm here. Knock, knock, knock. Are you there, Christopher? Knock, knock, knock. Can you tell?
What? I don't
Can
know.
you tell the Mounties that they have to let me in? Knock, knock, knock.
We'll never live down that Mountie. I swear, it's not a thing in Canada. It happens in like rural parts of Canada, not in the cities. It's so funny. And we don't have maple syrup. We don't have maple syrup everywhere. You got to go far outside the city for that. But Alison, this was great. You've shed so much light on so many aspects, and I can't wait to share this one. So I'll leave a link below to all of Alison's work, including Alison's website. If you haven't checked it out, all Alison's work. But thanks again, Alison. This is great. And we'll definitely chat in September.
Always so much fun talking. You're a very, very gracious host. Thank you.
Thank you.